Like my Black Lightning shirt?
I do. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Thursday. I am Matt Reese. This is the Mattriarchy. Welcome to the convergence of the old dudes and Twitless. And he's old inside. That's what really matters.
I'm dead inside.
Tonight we have reconvened to again talk about what we're going to do to fix comics, what we would do. And Tyler, who had some interesting ideas last time and isn't quite old, but he's a dad, so we'll let it slide. I wanted to get update on his because he's done his whole webtoons thingamy in the meantime, but he's not here yet, so we'll have to grill him when he gets here. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
So we've got, of course, Mike Hutchison. We've got RJ from Critical Blast. We've got the as I already mentioned, Twitless, and Captain Cummings standing in for Doug Ernst, who had more important things to do. I don't know what that's all about, but there you go. So let's go ahead and just jump right into the topic. So, Mike, I know you had several suggestions last week or last month or 6 weeks ago. I don't know, whenever it was. Last time we did this. So give us another suggestion, man, and we'll talk about it. What do we need to do to fix comics?
Yeah, last time I restricted myself to just the one, which was that they should do the monthly reprint compendium type thing. I was struggling to come up with others because we touched upon a bunch of others. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the main problems right now is that if I did get people to go into comic shops, there's nothing there that I like, so I can't imagine there's anything there that anybody else likes. But that problem aside, if the problem is promoting comics, I think we need to get somebody who would be like the spokesman for comics. Like give Nicolas Cage a stipend because the poor guy could use it. He will do anything for money. And he loves comic books. And just get him to do like a weekly video, or just him going into a comic shop on a weekly basis and talking about what comics are out there and where you go to find comics, where to, what's that phone number to find your local dealer or website or whatever to find your local dealer. Mainly what prompted this is I was thinking, what if Kim Kardashian talked about comics? I don't think we could afford to get her, and I don't think she cares.
She will also do anything for money, by the way.
Well, that's true. But, if we had somebody, I mean, everything's about influencers nowadays. Maybe Nicolas Cage is not an influencer, but you know what? The Rock talks about comic books every now and then. The Rock was showing Aquaman recently, and he had like an Aquaman action figure that his son was keeping with him while they watched something. I can't remember what, but he was talking about how much he loved Aquaman, and he's like, no, it's Black Adam. Black Adam's the one superhero you care about. But that's like, he talks about comic books. If we could get some, influencers to talk about comic books, about, going into comic shops, that would be, if we're talking about trying to keep comic shops going, it really needs somebody besides Kevin Smith, who anybody who knows who Kevin Smith is already likes comic books, but somebody who has an audience who just talks about, what's out there. He says, I love the Superman. And, hey, look, this is what Superman's up to this week. Nicolas Cage would do that, or get somebody that young people know who I don't know. That's my one suggestion. You can take it or leave it. Go on to somebody else.
PewDiePie.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know if he's into comics or not. That's actually... I think that's a valid consideration, and I think that was one of the things that in the 60s and 70s and 80s, that's kind of what Stan Lee did with all of the stuff in the bullpen and the whole idea of the Marvel Marching Society and all the stuff that was mostly made up, but was there to give the fans the sense of engagement in the process, and to also draw new people in because it's like, oh, it's really friendly. And I remember when I first started getting into comics, right? It was, reading Denny O'Neill's little From the Den editorials. and he'd do his suggested reading lists, and it was like, well, that sounds like an interesting book. And I don't know that I ever actually read any of the books he suggested, but the fact that he was saying, come back next month, and in between times, here's something that'll help that you might find interesting, right? That was really kind of engaging in that whole work. And I think that there's something that we have, thanks to social media, a lot of access to creators, but it's not the same kind of engagement, I don't think. Right. And I also think that it's sort of like it's not the sort of thing that is necessarily drawing people that aren't already interested in. No, Star. Captain Cummings is not a Matt. He's simply a guest. There's just the one of me today. So, although next week Matt Krotz will be in. Yes,
he's a good guest to have.
He's a good guest to have. Yeah. So anyway, I also think that having a not necessarily just a celebrity voice, but especially somebody like Nick Cage who's super invested in the medium,
right,
wouldn't be a bad thing. Especially since, I mean, I don't know, but I think that's only part way there. Letting people know that there's interesting things in comics doesn't help if you still can't get them.
Right.
I was talking to Nerd Wonder on Twitter today, and talking about, I think one of the biggest problems is, she said, well, comic writers should make more. And I said, comic creators are never going to make more until they start selling more books, and people can't get them to buy them, and they're too expensive. So, well, there's no margin.
Brian Michael Bendis is making 4 figures per page.
Well, yes, he gets all of the money.
Yeah, that's depressing. Why did you bring that up? You just ruined my day.
Yeah. Here's the thing you got to remember, RJ. He gets paid by the word. So
yeah, he put that in his contract, I'm sure.
It's like friggin' Dickens.
Ooh, look, Justice League. Open it up. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the time of heroes. It was the time of villains.
You're missing the fact that it has to be snippy. It has to be like, so like totally it was like a time for heroes, but also like it's really bad, you know?
Here's the thing I have to say about Bendis, right? Bendis writes, he very much writes the way people talk. That doesn't mean it belongs in a comic book.
Because most people are stupid.
Yeah.
I think Bendis writes how he thinks millennials talk.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they do. They grew up on Joss Whedon films. They do.
He doesn't the way he writes, it's not how everyone talks, especially specifically how he writes Iron Man and characters who have an attitude. It's just it's 200% snark.
Yeah, well, I mean, I just recently forced my way through the first volume of Powers, largely just to see if there's anything worth reading there, and there was about a third of a story that was worth reading in that. So,
I think Powers is the only thing of him that I can actually recommend.
Yeah, I can't. I can the Young Justice issues 1, 3, and 5, and that's it.
So I have to say this, Powers is actually one of the few places where occasionally Bendis will turn off his Bendis speak. Because I think it's, what is it? Is it Powers? What's the one where he does the prehistoric story? He does this one where he tells like the origin story of the characters in Powers, and he does like wordless sequences. Like, can you imagine that? Completely like wordless.
Yeah. Had to kill him.
Yeah. So he's capable of it. It's just, he just does it. I really think that he just, I guess, learned all the wrong lessons from Buffy.
Well, and it's one of those things where I reflect back on I had a conversation. I've told this on stream before. This is not necessarily germane to the topic, but I'm going to tell my story. I borrowed anyway. And I was speaking with, oh my goodness, I cannot remember his name right now. Never mind. We're going to skip the story and move on because I can't remember the fellow who told it to me's name. So we're just going to leave it. So anybody else have an idea about the idea of celebrity representation or the whole influencers idea in terms of marketing comics? Anybody have anything?
I like it.
I think so.
I mean,
So-
you have to have an ambassador for the product that you're selling.
And it seems weird to me that like not
I mean,
everybody.
even Stan Lee understood that, and
Mhm.
I like the idea. I don't know if it's how practical it is, because I think Zach, Richard or Zach, whatever name I'm supposed to call him, diversity in comics. But he brought up the point that there was a push at one point by I don't know if it was Marvel or DC to actually, hey, celebrities, take pictures of yourselves with comics, and some of them actually did it, and it just didn't take, it didn't stick. So there's. Like I definitely think it can't hurt, and so I'm with you there. I'm wondering what else is needed, because at least with Stan Lee was, for better or worse, he felt himself, tied to the medium, and so he stuck with it for life.
Yeah.
And whereas just getting one photo op with Jason Momoa with an Aquaman comic is not enough to drive up the sales of Aquaman. I think from what we've seen,
a photo's not interactive. You see a photo. Stan Lee starting a soapbox, format where you can write to him and tell him your thoughts is interactive. So it engages with the people, and you're having a social dialogue.
Yeah,
You're creating a fanship, and
a
it's
photo of you
creating an
holding a
atmosphere.
comic is not a thing. A photo of you holding a comic is not going to motivate most people. I mean, it really isn't. That's exactly why I wanted to say, because it is Stan Lee. We're missing that ambassador now, and we need at least one ambassador, if not a bunch.
Well, and the ambassador dictates the audience. I mean, if you get the wrong ambassador, well, I won't say the wrong ambassador, but depending on which ambassador you get, that's going to drive the audience, which is going to drive the writing. We've had television shows in which comics have played a major part. Now, most recently comes to mind is The Big Bang Theory, and you know what that did to comic book culture. But prior to that, the last place I remember seeing comics playing a persistent but not overwhelming role was Roseanne.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they were just part of the scenery.
Yeah, well, and I mean,
that's both the same person. Roseanne and Big Bang Theory are both the same producer, but if going back to Big Bang Theory, the first time we met Stuart on that show. The first time we met Stuart on that show, they talked about how, he's a professional artist, and he's really interesting, and he's cool, and he actually dated Penny. And then as the seasons went on, he was just the biggest loser you've ever seen. And it's like, I don't know what they did with that character, but it's like, it really does change the way you look at, the comic shop. It's a dingy, horrible place run by a dingy, horrible person, and nobody wants to go there.
Right.
He was a loser among losers.
But that's also TV writing. Like, usually the characters either get better or go to the lowest common denominator jokes every time.
And that's one of the things you have. I don't know. I mean, like a lot of TV shows are like that too. But I think the other part of it is like I don't think it's just about necessarily the idea of the portrayal in media. I think that's a factor, but I don't necessarily think that's the sole thing. Because if you look at like crossover marketing that has happened, like in the past, a lot of it is like Gerard Way, who the lead singer for the My Chemical Romance, got into making comics because he always loved comics. And there was a significant crossover with people that were like My Chemical Romance fans that went out and bought Gerard's Umbrella Academy and the books he did with DC because they liked My Chemical Romance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was part of making it. He wasn't just somebody who's like, hey, I kind of dig comics. Oh, I'll get comics too, Gerard. That didn't happen. It was because they were already invested in his creative endeavors. And so, he would talk about how much he loved comics, and people would be like, wait, maybe comics aren't just for losers because Gerard's cool. I'll see what Gerard does with comics. And I think that's part of the thing is Stan was Stan, but he was also making them, right? And if you were reading, like I said, I read Denny's columns because Denny was Denny, and he just he cared about what he was doing with it. And you could tell in the things, but they're just like nobody talks about that. I mean, there isn't that kind of a space for bringing new people in. right? It's all for people that are like super old or already like, comics. And I think that's a thing,
So another thing that I think is important to do is to look at the industries that are healthier. So this would be France and Japan. And so as far as I'm aware, I definitely think it would be good to have a ambassador for comics, but I don't know if there's definitely some rock star, like some superstars in, the manga scene, and some people who are very, important in the French scene, but I don't know if they have. I think it would help, I guess is what I'm saying. I think it would help. I'm not sure if it's the linchpin for addressing the issue.
Yeah. I would agree.
I'm not coming up with a linchpin. I know that. The linchpin is to make better comics.
Well, that's a big part of it. Okay.
I'm hoping go ahead. Change the topic.
I was going to say we could move on to the next suggestion, see what RJ has to say. But if you have anything more on the topic?
Well, yeah. I mean, what is the what defines fixing comics? Are we talking about fixing it financially or fixing it artistically? Because if we look at fixing it financially just to keep the market alive, I've had this idea that if I had $20 and AT&T said we'll take it and give you DC Comics, I would, I've often said I would just reboot everything and start day one, and 5 years later you'll get Robin and it's going to be Dick Grayson. He's going to be 13 years old. Deal with it, and just truly scorched earth and start over. None of this half boots and somewhat boots and all that. But if another alternative to that would be to just keep it going in a new imprint, and would be like the old guys comics. And it would be, go back to whatever came out in January 1970. Reissue all those books with new covers from new artists. Same interiors, every month, release on that schedule. You could do it with like the, like the dollar comics they did, or you could do it with like, something less than $6 a book. And, there would be like this, this retro line that they would be having. You could just follow along like you did in the 70s. If you weren't there, then it's brand new to you, right? And you're not paying a bunch for it.
Yeah. And printed on better quality than they had in the 70s. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things that I think is really interesting about that idea too is like, DC and Marvel both have been doing, limited reprints of pivotal issues to try to bring people back in, right? So it'll be like, one issue of Swamp Thing, or, like the first appearance of Batgirl, or, whatever, change it up. And I've got a bunch of those. Well, a couple of years back ago, at the big, I can't remember what it's called, but it was the big like vendor conference they had. Didio was on stage and he complained about how like you guys buy more of our old issues than our new issues, and that makes me angry. And I'm like,
get a clue.
This is God speaking to you. I mean, not literally, of course. I don't think that God cares, but I just don't. But I mean, at the same time, like that's obvious. Like the fans are wanting this old material. They see quality in that, and I mean, and they're seeking that out. And stores are able to move them, right? Yeah. Stores are buying these because they can move them, right? And that says, first of all, maybe there's more to the old guy demographic, but also, I mean, there are people buying them for their kids. They're buying them because because
they know they can buy them for their kids.
I know they can buy them for their kids. Like I just got done reading the first volume of Lock and Key, and I really liked it. But man, I don't. Even my kids are nearly grown, and I don't want them reading that.
Lock and Key is very good, yeah. But I think it was written by Stephen King's son or something? Yeah. You can see the King influence there.
Joe Hill?
Yeah, Joe Hill.
I did not know he was Stephen King's son.
I found that out. It's actually funny. I read it, and then I was like, this seems familiar. And then I went back to the archives of our website, idealcomics.net, and we have a review that my partner Chris Lawton did in 2015. And he mentions it in there, and I was like, oh, yes, that's why I remember the series. Chris reviewed it.
That explains why the Netflix series is so hard to follow then, because the Kings are cursed with, good books not being able to be translated into film.
Yeah. I do know
terrible show. It was a terrible show.
I'm on the 4th episode. I've been binging it this week.
It made me angry. It was so bad.
I do know that, like, in the Stephen King books I've read, every one of them had a horrible ending except for Gingerbread Girl. But Lock and Key, welcome to the first volume. I can't remember the name of it right now. It had a good ending that led into it. I thought it did well, but everything else that his dad's done that I've read, I've disliked the ending on. Yeah. Anyway.
I mean, Joe Hill did a great job with the with the Lock and Key and the Sandman crossover that came out week before last. I thought that was one of the best things I've read in 20 years now.
Well, and he's been doing several books for DC over the last 12, 18 months, and people seem to really, really like Joe Hill on his stuff. This is the first time I've read him, so I can't really comment on that. But yeah, people seem to really like his stuff. So. Hothead Studios, new face in the chat, says most books don't transition well to TV and film. Maybe. I think it's a matter of anything's got to cut out something. And so
that's a debatable point, I would say.
I think that's debatable. I think it's seldom done as well as perhaps it could be. But there's a lot.
There's so much interpretation in a book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you get into the character's head so much in a book that that's something that you just can't do in a film. And when they try it, it's always with voiceover and such, which sometimes works, but most of the time doesn't really.
I would say, though, from a personal perspective, I think a chunk of how you appreciate film and literature largely, or can to a large extent, depend on the extent or nature of your own imagination. Because if you have a very, very vivid, rich, deep ability to imagine and construct things in your own head, then you're going to get a lot out of literature, and then you're going to watch the adaptations of that, and you're going to feel let down over and over and over again. I think if you have, I don't want to be judgmental, but I think if you have a more limited imagination, I think you go, oh, I read this book, and then the movie was great. Obviously that's an oversimplification, but I think the people who are very disappointed with adaptations of books, I think, have very, very deep imaginations, especially towards the literature they're reading.
Well, and I think there's a complexity to it, right? Like a good example of this, there's two different ways of that there are different ways of reading Bram Stoker's Dracula, right? I think Bram Stoker's Dracula is it is a masterpiece of efficiency and precision of the language, right? And the way that he uses language gives you so much hint about what Dracula's doing when nobody knows where Dracula's there. It's phenomenal. I mean, he's like in between every blank space on the page. But like, I've talked to people about it, and they're like, I didn't pick that up from it.
Yeah.
If you want a really good, I was gonna say it's a slog to get through sometimes, but if you want the best epistolary novel ever, read Dangerous Liaisons by Chardelot Laclos. He takes the epistolary novel to like a height I have never seen before. It's insane. No vampires though.
Being epistolary is what I didn't like about Bram Stoker's Dracula, because everything was being done in letters. My dearest Mina, the vampires are after me. I'm on the run. Like, why are you writing?
Well, that was one of the things that for me that was I don't want to say jarring, but was so interesting about it too, thinking about it. And even when you go back and like you watch Ken Burns' Civil War and you think about how much writing that was being done. Like people were writing letters to each other all the time. And
because that's all they had.
I have never written a letter to my mother. Never. Of course, she lives 5 blocks away, so I just walk over and say, hey, but
yes.
It wasn't always like that.
You had to be sent to summer camp for that to happen. I would love to film Bram Stoker's Dracula as a comedy. And just, like a screwball comedy, and it literally be to the book. And he's like, the whole thing is him writing these letters while he's, it's like, pull out notebook, write this down. Dear Mina. and honestly, how far is it to the post office from the castle? And why do you go back?
Well, that part was a journal entry.
Yeah.
So he just took it with him. Anyway, but back to the thing about the idea of where do we go off on RJ's idea? I forgot what you even said now.
It's old comics reprinted as new
Old
comics
comic reprinted.
every month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not in a tome, not in a showcase where you get a burst of a sale, but make the people come back every month.
Well, and DC was, in fairness, DC had been doing that with the Walmart prints, and those were popular enough that comics shops started asking for them. So they had additional prints for the shops, right? And it was funny because you can $5 at Walmart or $7 at your comic shop, right?
Yeah, exactly.
but it was the same book. I think the paper is a little heavier in the comic shop version. It's just regular magazine paper, like the Weekly World News kind of magazine paper, or Woman's World, or whatever it is. Really cheap stuff there. But the point being that for a while they were doing it, they were moving them pretty well, but I don't think they're doing them. I don't think they're moving like they were, at least not at my Walmart.
No, they're not, because I don't even know that they still continued. I thought they stopped. But you
got
got
these like three comic packages or whatever now.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they've got those with Marvel too. But yeah, DC. Yep. I say DC, but any of them could be like, they could have the 60s series, and they could start from January 1960, all the way through 69. And then, the next one will be in the 70s series, which was also publishing simultaneously, because every 10 years now, you've got a new market coming in. You just cycle it like Disney video releases.
Right. Well, and one thing, and I've mentioned this before, I think one of the problems we have is like they used to have, they like do little digest things when I was a kid.
I love that one.
Yeah, I've got the Joker one that they did in '89 too. But these ones, Archie still does these.
Yep.
Yeah, they do.
I've got about 1,000 of them.
They sell them right at the Walmart. So we talked about that last month. And I think one of the problems we have is that, like, the big two, the main superhero comics, because that's the thing, is everybody's got to remember, is like superhero comics aren't really in danger because of these. and people, it's My Hero Academia, right? It's the manga. It's black and white.
Oh, okay.
It's adapted from the Japanese comics, but I mean, these superheroes books are flying off the shelves. They just don't look like we grew up reading them, right? And
plus, they're not flying off of our shelves.
Well,
I mean, what was it? Demon Slayer, the last issue came out, and everybody in Japan with a wallet has a copy of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the population of Japan and subtract the babies, that's how many they sold.
Wow.
So people, I mean, so comics as a genre aren't necessarily in danger, but in terms of like Western superhero comics, they're just not being. And I think there are lots of reasons for that. But I think exposing the old books, you don't have to. I mean, on the funniest thing to me about old comics, especially the really old, like the Silver Age stuff, some of that stuff's really good. Carmine Infantino's Flash stuff. Oh my goodness, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's simple. Everyone loves it. Dude's dead, so they don't even have to pay him.
Yeah.
What you looking for?
My charger. I forgot to plug in earlier.
He's hosting the show, and he's about to lose power.
Again, yes, it sounds like it's a Thursday then.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah,
just about.
While you're doing that, RJ, what you were talking about with the DC reset that isn't a reset, that was a big problem with the New 52 was that they kept Batman going and they kept Green Lantern going. Yes. They didn't relaunch everything.
Because those are the two things that were selling in the first place.
Right. But if you're going to reset the DC universe, reset it back to zero and start afresh. That would be great, but they didn't do that. They just jumped 5 years into a timeline that we didn't know, a new timeline and I couldn't follow it. I was glad that allowed them to do things like they brought back Elongated Man and Sue. They brought back
sort of.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, he's got an orange costume for some reason, but
It
yeah, they
confused-
brought him back. But then they also brought back Ted Cord, our favorite Blue Beetle, and he's actually going to have a series now. I'm actually going to buy a comic book in a few months. Blue and Gold. Dan Jurgens writing. They're doing Blue and Gold finally. It's like, but why did it take so long? We've been wanting this since the '80s, and nobody would give it to us. I couldn't.
That half boot of the New 52 even confused the writers, because you had a scene in there where Batman's overlooking Crime Alley, and he said it's a little dialogue. He's like, it was 18 years ago today that life stopped making sense, and someone said, so you had Damian when you were 12?
Yeah.
Well, he's supposed to be artificially aged anyway.
Right.
Yeah. That's always been part of his canon.
Yeah, but even so,
Azrael treatment.
But he would have been conceived before he was Batman, which, that doesn't. If his Batman career is so short, how does he have a kid who was conceived because they sought him out because he was Batman? And it's like. That whole timeline just didn't make any sense with Robin.
Damian, in my head canon, Damian is still being raised by another family. He's still pretty young. They left him they found him in a basket with a necklace, and the son of the demon continues on.
Son of the demon. I never wanted them to follow up on that. I never wanted Damian Wayne. I hate that Tim Drake is not Robin.
Yeah, but, I agree.
You know what saved Damian Wayne? The only thing that redeemed Damian Wayne in the entire DC universe, John Kent.
Yep.
And what they do to John Kent?
Made him old and stupid.
Old and stupid.
And now he's Superman.
Listen, I get enough old and stupid. I live my life. I don't need my stupid.
I hate to say this. I get that you can do great stuff with Superman's kid, and I especially like that Superman and Lois TV show. I think that's really good. It's some of the best stuff I've seen in terms of adapting, and it's kind of like because they don't care about the rest of the CW verse. They just have it on their own thing. I like that, but
they can't.
They can't
because it's 15 years in the future.
That's right. Yeah. But oh gosh, I got distracted. I'm sorry. But I still wish that Superman was hiding his identity from Lois Lane and having to duck out and say, oh my gosh, somebody must have peanuts in the room. I'm allergic, and run out. And
yes,
I miss that stuff. And the old, what was called the love triangle with two people, where Lois loves Superman and Clark loves Lois, and that I think that's such a great thing, and they abandoned that so long ago.
Clark. And it was and Superman loves Clark. I'm just trying to
It's not really a triangle, but then
I tell you what, I would watch the first 2.5 minutes of Superman and Lois on repeat and be completely happy.
I've watched it 3 times.
If you've seen it, you know why. Right up to the point where he says, "Thanks, my mom made it," and flies off. I was like, "That's Superman. Why can't you do that on a full-time basis?"
Yeah. I don't really care about his teenager son struggling, and it's like I just want to see Superman.
Well, and the thing about this goes back to the Bendis issue. I don't understand. Okay, so Bendis goes to the trouble of resurrecting the real Connor Kent, the real Connor Kent, and he does a great job. With one exception, he does a great job of taking that character and adapting it. The thing that he does crappy is that, like, Connor's been raising this little boy as his kid there in the gem world, and he's like, okay, I found my teenage friends, bye.
Yeah.
And Connor would never do that. But the idea that like, everything before that moment in the script, he gives us back Connor after a decade, and I'm just like,
and then the moment when Jonathan meets Connor, he comes from the 25th century where he's been spending time with the Legion of Superheroes, and brings with him Brainiac 5, who's a member of the Legion of Superheroes, because he had to come back and show Brainiac 5 what it was like before the Legion of Superheroes. This is something that Bendis drills into your head over 6 panels. That the 21st century, the 31st century is where the Legion of Superheroes is. And there's kind of, hey, oh, who's this? Oh, right, you're like my stepbrother. Cool, that's nice. There's no impact on Jonathan. Just takes everything. My friend Steve Mitchell has a character called Bulletproof that just goes with the flow, and Jonathan reminds me of him in this sense where he's like, if he was following a trail of Reese's Pieces and found a Skittle in the middle, he'd be like, oh, a fruity one, and just keep going.
Yeah, indeed. Anyway, Tyler, you haven't had a chance to say anything yet because I haven't introduced you because you just got here.
I did.
How's it going, man?
It's going good.
Hi,
I just had to put my kid down to bed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I apprate that.
I'm glad you clarified.
Put your kid down.
Yeah, I was like, I've had enough of you, man. Like, you're not behaving. You don't pay rent. Get out of here. Yeah.
Just insulted him. Put him down. Okay. How I mentioned before you got here that I wanted to grill you. Last time you were here, you were about to launch Chefs on Webtoons.
Yeah.
And I confess I have not looked at it once. I've been crazy busy. I haven't read any webcomics in like 2 months.
You're good. I'm not offended.
But yeah, I just it's small talk on my show. Go with it.
I'm pissed. Okay, fine. I'm pissed, and I hate you, and I'm gonna tweet about this. And you wait for the YouTube videos on my channel.
I will make it a song. Please write a song about it. How is the comic going? Are people tuning in?
No. No.
Dang.
They're not, but that's okay. Here's the thing. I knew that was going to be the case. It was no secret to me. That like Webtoons was always going to be hard, especially in the superhero category. It's just not built that way. But you know what it did? What it did give me is I haven't talked about this much because I don't want to, but I'll talk it here because I like you. It is because of it though. I was able to have a phone call with the Webtoons marketing team, and I was able to talk to them and be like, "Oh, so like this, how do you guys do things?" And I am now part of their digital promo team where I can go, "Hey, I'd like to talk to this artist who works on one of your originals. Can I have them on my show? Hey, I'd love to talk to an editor and have them on my show. Hey, I want to make a content on this webtoon. Can you give me the files?" So I couldn't have done that without having put it on Chefs, putting Chefs on there. So that's been fun. And people who have been asking me like, "Oh, how do I get the physical book?" We're gonna give out the physical book in June for $5. If you sign up for my Patreon at the $5 tier, I'll send you the physical book.
Cool.
So, hey, Tyler,
Talk to me.
I have a song for you.
I'm ready.
Here's my book. Here is my chicken book.
You know what's funny is I recorded a song about me getting my book finally, but I haven't got my book. It comes Tuesday, so I can't actually like show the song. But it's finally coming.
So, side note on that, because this is fairly public, I put on Twitter last fall. Mitch was on Facebook talking about how wonderful his life is, and I was like, "Where the hell's my chicken book, Mitch?"
I remember that. I remember you posting on there.
I said, I don't want to hear anything except you drawing. That's the only sound I want to hear coming from you.
Mm-hmm.
And
he didn't like that.
He blocked me and refunded me.
Oh, what a bitch.
You didn't even request a refund.
I didn't request a refund because I wanted that book. But they sent it to me anyway.
Oh, really?
You got it gratis.
So like I'm still annoyed, but I can't be mad.
Because you actually got the book.
Because they actually gave me the book.
You know what?
For free.
I did not back the book. I got this from a guy on Twitter who said, "My chicken book arrived. I don't want it. I haven't even opened the box. I just peeled the label off. $15. It's yours." I'm like, "I'm your Huckleberry."
So yeah, apparently I feel like I have to actually read the thing and do a review.
I hear it's good.
Yeah, I don't know.
I read it. We could turn this into a Red Rooster review stream.
No, because I haven't read it
I
yet.
can bring up my review.
I have quite a few thoughts on it. It's interesting.
I do too, but I like the idea of having a group conversation about the Rooster, but let's do it after I've read it, and we can all come. Okay. We can reconvene, those of us who want to, and talk about that. Anyway, so Webtoons, that's been an exciting thing, even though like millions of people aren't reading Chefs yet.
That's but what so I don't know if you've seen on Twitter, but I've been posting images of of that blonde girl with like these mega gauntlets. And the book's called The Girl with the Mega Fists. And so so I spent like the last 3 months, like the first 3 months of the year, just having an absolute mental breakdown because for the last 2.5 years, I've just been trying to do what all the other indie creators have been doing. Crowdfund, Indiegogo, like, oh, we're doing Kickstarters right now. Oh, and the heat's over at Indiegogo. Oh, you gotta do this now. And I was like, just trying to follow along. And I was like, man, I hate all of this. I hate crowdfunding. I hate all of this. And so I finally had a mental breakdown, canceled my Kickstarter, which funded in 3 hours. And then I've spent the last like month just going, okay, what do I do? What do I want to do? And so now I've created the comic book model that I want to do. It's different than other people's. It's the same as some, but it's different than the majority. And I'm super excited to launch it in June.
And you're going Patreon with that?
Yeah, so it's Patreon. So for $2 a month, every 2 weeks, you will get a digital 8 to 12 page comic. Every 2 weeks, you'll get a digital 8 to 12 page comic. If you are on the $5 tier, you'll still get those updates every 2 weeks. But after 10 or 12 chapters, I will create the physical book and immediately mail it to you. Mm-hmm. You'll immediately be mailed, no crowdfunding.
Yeah, Nick Mueller is working something like that on his.
And that's what Ed Pisker was doing with his horror book too.
Yeah, and that's what the guys at Rags Rags are doing as well. My price point is cheaper than all of theirs, and I even messaged Nicholas. I was like, "Hey, you're my arch nemesis, so game on."
Well, I think one of the aspects too, like some of you guys that are gifted enough to do your own art have a leg up on those of us who, can't.
That's like when people say, how are you gonna do 2 page, updates every 2 weeks. I'm the artist, I don't have to pay out of my pocket and take all this risk. I'm just sacrificing my time, which I'd already be sacrificing making comics anyways. I might as well just do it on my own terms.
This is true.
Prove me wrong.
No, I can't. The marketing is spot on. But no, and I think like that's and the one thing is like I've cards on the table. I think pretty much everybody knows this or have had access to this when it comes to Nick. Like Nick's brought me on as a writing consultant for stuff. So I've been doing a little bit of stuff in the background with his project. So I kind of know a little bit how that's working out, and I think I can see the benefit of that model for people that are in your position. I'm just not that guy, right?
It's a miracle that Brian is able to do it with him
Brian
being a
works
writer.
3 jobs.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a miracle that even that he can do it. Like they're working their ass to make Rags. And here's the thing, like when people say like, oh, does that mean you're not doing crowdfunding? No, I am. So on Patreon, let's say the book is $20 from Patreon people, it's going to be like $30 on crowdfunded, and then an additional, maybe $35 afterwards on my Gumroad store. So I always say, hey, if you want the best deal, subscribe to my Patreon. If not, you're going to pay a little extra.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's also a good expectation for that with the way crowdfunding just works.
Yeah.
I think people are kind of used to that idea. But yeah. That was one interesting. Now, that was also a follow-up from last time.
Yeah. I'm ready.
Captain Cummings, you were new this time. Do you have any suggestions on how to save or how to fix comics?
So I was thinking about this from like a historical perspective, because you can't really expect Marvel and DC to change anything or innovate in any manner, because they're already like the big dogs, and from my understanding, like they're just as profitable as they have been. So it's going to take somebody that wants to get into the industry. And when we've seen innovations, it's usually from a technological aspect. We've seen it with movies. The Matrix was huge CGI push. Comics started because of immigrants being kind of kept out of the regular arts, and so they created comic books. So the big technological advancement that we have right now is kind of being used to innovate video games through ownership. Because if you buy a digital game, you don't actually own that game. You have the right to play that game, and whenever they want to shut down that game, you're like basically screwed then. And that's the same case with Comixology. If you buy a comic book, you don't own that comic book. You have the right to read that comic book. And whenever they shut down Comixology, if that ever happens, I doubt it, but never say never. Boom, anything that you spent, it's all basically gone. You're just essentially renting it. So blockchain technology is like the huge thing that's allowing ownership on the digital market. And I think that if you can figure out how to use that to get your product to people on the digital side, you'll create fans that will also like collecting paper stuff as well.
Well, here's a good question. Hothead in the chat says, what is the purpose of digital if I don't own it?
You would own the digital copy. You would have it forever.
How's that different from having a PDF?
Right. I think he was talking about before when people talk like you get games on Steam.
There's a
but Steam can always take it away from you.
Steam's a great point right there. The difference between a PDF is for a PDF, usually when you open it, the PDF really sucks to try to read it on your computer. Everybody that's ever sent me a PDF, it's like a pain in the ass. So you want to develop something that's user friendly to actually read it. And I mean, I don't know anything about, I'm not a computer programmer or anything like that, but, the great thing about if you're using it through blockchain is you could actually access it from anywhere. A PDF, you can only access it, let's say on that device that you have it on, or if you're using it on, one of the Microsoft cloud or something like that, well, then you're not actually owning it either.
The blockchain does lock in your rights to something.
Yeah. With smart contracts. That's what the term they use, smart contracts, because you actually own, in this case, cryptocurrencies, you own that Bitcoin. You have it, unless you have it onto a Coinbase or some place like that, then they're holding on to it like a bank. But we won't get all into that.
So, guys, crypto's the future, and well, Matt, what Cummings has said about the PDF, it's so true. Even when you go on Kickstarter and you back a PDF, let's be real, it's you get to read the comic, but it's not a good experience.
Yeah.
It's never. I just shared my screen. I want to show something. I've only showed people once, and so this is what I'm doing for my Patreon. You have to put in. So if you, this is just for Patreon people, but you would get this file, and then you put in a password or whatever you want, and then I've made it so that it's mobile friendly,
and that's better than what I usually see.
Yeah, it's still it won't be the physical comic, but I've made it so that it's mobile friendly. That's always hard with the PDF. If you're reading it on mobile and iPad, you're scrolling down, and God forbid there's a 2-page spread. And now you've got to, get half and scroll. So I've been working on this for 2 weeks, trying to okay, how do I give the comic book experience digitally, since I'm going to be doing digital first.
One thing I wanted to point out before we go on is the art scene in general, when it comes to crypto and blockchain art, it's already making millions of dollars. There's artists selling their digital artwork to people that are buying it for millions of dollars.
Let's go ahead, and I'm going to interrupt just a second to explain a couple things. We've got some people in the chat asking about what NFTs are. So blockchain technology, so to kind of explain it, it's like a daisy chain of data, right?
Yeah.
And when you change one node, it changes that place on all of the chain. So the way it works for a currency is that when you transfer it, every node of it on the network recognizes that transfer. So you can't copy it, because if you copy it, everyone knows you copied it, because everyone said every instance that it's been recorded says it was copied. So it's just impossible to make fraud with crypto. And so when it comes to an art transfer, it's the same kind of a thing where when you sell the contract for the NFT, it's part of that picture, the history of it forever.
Yeah.
So people are like, well, I can just screen cap it. You can't, because that will go into the chain too.
I mean, you can screen capture the picture, but it's not the original.
Yeah.
This is the original.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go too much into crypto because it's like that's totally off topic.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm a 30-year IT guy. My current position right now is with the bank. My current project is finding crypto and fintech disruptors. I don't understand NFTs.
I just got back. We're not talking about the dog here. When we're talking crypto, we're not talking about the dog.
No, that would be cool.
Sorry, I just rejoined the conversation. Okay. All right. Sorry.
I just got that. I'm a little slow on the uptake.
Ladies and gentlemen, just a reminder that Michael started reading comics before the crisis. So
when they were good.
Anyway, but yeah, and I do think that technology is a factor. I do think the idea of like looking at different platforms. I have been reading lately a lot of PDFs, but I don't read them on my computer. I have a separate tablet that I download things to, because it's not readable on my computer.
So I think a combination of my blockchain and Michael's like ambassador, like whoever's making those comics has to be a great ambassador to sell it to the public.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's one thing about, and it's really weird. It's been so weird in the last couple of weeks, with NFTs and cryptocurrencies getting so much time in the press. There is a whole class of people that are like, you're going to ruin the universe with your cryptocurrencies and all of the electricity they take. And I'm like, you're telling me this on Twitter, right? I mean, there are 2 billion tweets sent a year.
Well, that was crypto technology that doesn't use any. It's actually like green friendly. So,
out of all the takes and problems to have, that one was the most garbage take. There are other reasons, I think, to debate NFTs. I think part of it is because it's almost like the speculator market, where it's like there's a layer of artificiality to it, because like as many people mentioned, you can just screen cap an image and have the image, but only one person will have the official version, and your mileage will vary depending on how much value you place on that ownership.
The Mona Lisa. How many pictures of the Mona Lisa are there?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So like the ownership of art then becomes like this thing where it's like you place a certain value on this kind of, authenticity you have in your own head in a way. So like I think there's some conversations you can have around that, and what value things should have on them. But
NFTs are this year's Beanie Baby.
Yeah.
I think it'll have a little more holding power than Beanie Babies, but also this is in the chat. This is giving me a headache already. I cannot totally agree with that. I appreciate the flexibility of. I appreciate the flexibility of the. You're still on mute, Michael. I appreciate the flexibility of digital comics, but I'd way rather. I mean, look what I found in a quarter. Come on. Right?
It's because you guys you're all the old guys. You're not the new crowd of kids who just love their video games.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is like I've mentioned before. I just don't think that we're selling comics. I think the main American superhero comic industry is trying to sell a product that people don't want at a price they don't want to pay. And I think part of it is. I've mentioned this before. I think that part of it is that this is what when kids go to buy comics, this is what they think of, and I think that's one of the issues. But anyway,
is it an issue though?
Well, I think it's an issue, but it's not necessarily a problem.
Is it a single issue?
Oh,
It's a
That
trait.
was funny. But I don't buy physical stuff anymore, mainly because my place is small. I have nowhere to put it, and I don't want to. But like I for $1.99, I pay for the Shonen Jump app, and I have access to over 100 chapters a day. That's 100 issues a day. I read 181 issues of a comic last week, bawled my eyes out at the end, and went, "Oh, all right, next one. Let's figure out." But then after that, I bought a statue, and so they got their money that way. I think there's I think we just need to get children, people back into. The reason why I think kids like manga and anime is because if they read the anime and then they read the manga, the adaptation was perfect. Or pretty close. And, same, I read the manga. Oh, I find out, they're making an anime and it's good. Awesome. But when Scott Snyder makes Court of Owls and then they go, hey, we're doing Batman vs. Robin and the Court of Owls are in there. And then I watch Batman vs. Robin. It's a completely different story. It just has elements of the Court of Owls, but it's not an actual adaptation. I'm like, well, that sucked. I wanted to see certain moments play out.
I felt exactly the same way when they released Teen Titans: The Judas Contract.
Yeah.
I was like, that was not the Judas Contract. That was
Exactly.
not the at all.
I hate to play devil's advocate. Actually, I love it, but I want to push against this idea, even just for contrarian's sake, because I hear this argument a lot, and I don't think it's wrong, but I'm wondering if it's missing a piece, which is we just need good writing, quote end quote.
No.
And then I look back at because I have some old issues of Suicide Squad and back when it was Task Force X, and they travel inside a painting telepathically and fight dinosaurs, and I'm like, I'm sorry, this isn't Shakespeare, and it was in some ways it was you could call it bad writing. It was crazy insanity. What I would call it was genuine, and I'll defend bad writing. Comic books they cut their teeth on bad writing. When you pull out a lot of those old superhero stories, some of them are rough. The art is rough. It can be crude. Even from the greats like Ditko and Kirby, who people worship, it's like, I'm sorry, I attended a panel where they pulled out the original artwork for it was Amazing Fantasy. Which one is it?
15
for Spider-Man, yeah. And you can see the places where Ditko is, probably because he's moving so quickly, but he's taking shortcuts. He's doing, their artwork is crude in places. And so this idea that comics were so good back in the day and they're so bad now, I agree with it to an extent, but I feel like the piece is missing. And the piece that I think is missing is, like I said, I think there's a sort of genuineness to them, because when people were writing Spider-Man back in the day, they believed in it. And so I feel like that's the quality that people are missing nowadays. And so it's because like I said, I wouldn't necessarily elevate it and say the writing now is so terrible now. I would say that it's probably is equal, or it's as good as it's ever been in terms of overall, literary quality. But what I would say is nowadays people don't seem to believe in what they're writing anymore. In fact, they seem to believe in the opposite of what they're writing. So when they get Captain America, Iron Man, Superman, whoever, as opposed to being like, yeah, I believe in this and I really want to write it to the best that it could be, it's like, how can I take this apart and dismantle it? And that's not entirely to I think the blame for that is not as evil as some people would say. In some cases, it is. There are people like Ryan Johnson who just purposely want to nuke a particular property. But then if you are granted an opportunity to write someone else's artwork, you're going to automatically want to put your own spin on it. You're going to want to make it your own. And that's just kind of the nature of a property that runs for as long as the comics that we have nowadays. In many cases, to compare manga, right? Most manga that I'm aware of they're the child of a single genius. You know, the guy who writes Berserk, which is a fantastic series, it's one guy. He's been writing it for like, what, 20, 30 years or something. So it's only him. It's not been given to a telephone line of, you know, hundreds of creators over a, you know, almost 100-year lifespan. And so part of it is like the nature of the beast. We have serial storytelling, and these are just some of the challenges when you have a story that's gone on for so long and been handed, the torch keeps getting handed. And so to me, one of the big things, like, if you want to fix something, is how do we hand that torch well, and to continue a storyline that people want to continue to see. I am a little dubious of that idea that comics were written so much better back in the day. It's like, man, I could pull out some issues of just complete and utter.
I do buy a lot of quarter bin issues, and there's a lot of trash.
Right, exactly.
And it's good to keep in mind that, like,
but it's good trash.
You
It's
always
good trash.
remember the good, and these companies have, Marvel and DC have gone bankrupt like almost multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What they've sucked out is it was not good writing, it was fun writing. And they've sucked the fun out of it, because you know what I'd like to see Captain America do? I'd like to see Captain America be dropped out of an airplane with a parachute over Germany and fight some soldiers with a tank. I would love to see Captain America do that. You know what I'd like to see Batman do? I'd like to see Batman stop somebody from hauling a television out somebody's third-story window onto a fire escape. I would love to see Batman do that.
That's a good point. Yeah, I can agree to that.
The Red Skull is Jordan.
And you can take over another property and put your own spin on things without destroying the core of the character. I have to walk that line all the time when I'm writing The Destroyer. I don't own Remo Williams. He's been around since 1971, and I'm still putting my own spin on things that the character's doing. But at his heart, he's still, the master of Sinanju. He's still the smart ass. Master Chun still is Master Chun. Smitty's got to be 172 years old now, and he's still not going to die.
And I actually do think that's a factor. And I think we look back at like the guys who were kind of guiding comics when I came in, certainly, and I think some of you guys too. You got Roy Thomas and Denny O'Neil and Roger Stern and Dan Jurgens is involved now, but Dan Jurgens, his books tend to still maintain those old characters, those old characterizations of the people we love. But a lot of those guys, that they had such a respect for what came before. And I mean, one of my favorite series was a kind of a later series in terms of the overall scope. When you're looking at a Starman by James Robinson, right? It's been a while ago, but it was kind of at a later iteration in terms of comic book history, but it was all about love and respect for the people that came before. And I think that's something that, like, a lot of modern comics don't have. And I mean, some people have said that, well, the problem was when comics started looking for established writers instead of looking for people with writing talent from the things. You have like Bob Rozakis and back in the day, Bob Rozakis and Roy Thomas. They came up with the stuff. They would cut their teeth on comics, and they loved it. So when they started writing them, everyone, of course, loved what they wrote, because they had the passion for it. And that's what's there's an argument for that. But I don't think it's just that, because I think you could have come from other stuff and still have a respect for where you're at.
I still think if Marv Wolfman and Carl Kiesel and Chris Claremont and John Byrne and all those, Paul Kupperberg and all those guys just said, hey, you know what? Let's just get together and write comics, and we'll just crowdfund a couple of different titles and put them all into the same house. It would scare the industry, because it would be a powerhouse of comic book production again. I could be wrong now. It could be like, Stan Lee Presents for DC.
That was still.
I think the big problem is, does any of them know anything about distributing them or marketing or anything like that?
But, and also with that, we'll use, it was funny. I came into the stream and you guys are hating on Damian, hating on John Kent, hating on the New 52. But for me, my very first comic was Batman New 52. When I like it was like the third issue, and I went, oh, number 3, I can like this is like my chance to jump in finally and get into comics, and I haven't looked back since. And
Where can I email you my pity?
But I loved it. I was just having so much fun, but because of it made me read a bunch of the older stuff. And it kept. I mean, I've stopped reading all the newer stuff now, but they're balls. But like for me, like Damian Wayne was like my Robin, and I love Damian Wayne. But then you guys are talking about all these old people, and I don't know who these people are. I've never read a comic by Chris Claremont or John Byrne. I know these people.
It would take you like 45 minutes to read like a single issue of Chris Claremont.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, so like I've seen their comics, and I open them and go, "Oh, this is old," and I like But so I guess my point is like. Thinking now, yeah, you might be able to get all these old school powerhouse people, and it's going to attract the older audience, but that's not saving comics. That's
you would need somebody that can connect with the younger audience to attract the people.
Which actually comes back to one of the things that and unfortunately, apparently Mike Hutch is having problems getting connected again. But one of his suggestions before you got here was, there's a marketing idea, looking for a celebrity who's really into comics, actually having like a regular show or some sort of regular thing to say, this week in comics that you should go buy.
We need Keanu.
That sounds like an all right idea, but I like the Stan Lee homegrown idea better personally.
Yeah, I don't dislike.
You need like that one, like maybe he's the editor of this company or something. I don't know who that would be. I don't know anything about marketing, but
unfortunately, it would be like
I know it's very important though, because you could have some of these great comics that nobody literally reads, and you read it and you're like, this is so great. How come nobody likes this?
Well, and that's like I'm gonna forget his name right now. The Silencer that was part of the DC New Age of Hero.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a great book.
It was such a good book, and it only ran for 18 issues because it got like 1 month of press, and then DC never talked about it again. They had one crossover appearance with Nightwing, which was fun, but was so deep into whatever lore they were telling in Nightwing of the story that it was really hard to catch on to. But I liked it anyway, and it was one of those things where it was so mishandled, and it was such a good book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here
I love, and it was so good because it was just like it was like authentically mom and dad action. Right,
and then they made her a third-tier villain on Arrow.
Said how great it was. I bought it in trade, and then I was like, that's really good.
By the way, Captain Cummings, you talked about it takes 45 minutes to read a Chris Claremont book back in the day. It did, and it still was not as wordy as a Brian Michael Bendis book. It takes me 12 minutes to read a Brian Michael Bendis book because I'm like, words.
Just skip.
Here's a comic book page. Yeah.
Well, because the words have no substance. And Chris Claremont would be like, writing, novellas. And
well, what I like about, like, let's say you're reading a Silver Age book, most of the time they were monologuing like what you would see on the page, and you didn't necessarily have to read like every word. You could just like skim it, and you're like, oh, they're talking about what you're looking at. I can just keep going.
but I actually miss some of that nowadays because there's I noticed that a lot of
sometimes
modern
you need to be explained. You might
exactly I'm completely on board with that. Yeah,
and you look at like a lot that was a big trope that Will Eisner used in The Spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
But every word of his like dialogue, when the narrative matched the action, it was flavor, man. It was color. It made it feel more alive.
It's also the thought balloons.
Yeah.
Because thought balloons, like I said, Spider-Man. The reason why people love Spider-Man is because of his thought balloons. Without thought balloons, without thought balloons, Spider-Man is a dick.
Well, back in the day, Spider-Man was basically just Archie with action.
Right, but like, so if you take a look,
Archie is just Archie with action now.
But I really want to take that point a little further because if you look at Spider-Man's engagements, right, his mouth, what he's actually saying out loud to like a villain is something that's obnoxious.
Yeah.
Okay, and that makes you see that he has confidence. But in the thought balloon, you would often see him be show concern. Oh wow, if the lizard hits me with that tail, I'm going to be in trouble. Or ooh, that hit, like messed up my shoulder or something. And that raised the tension, which raised the stake in the story. If you remove the thought balloon, you remove two things. A, you remove the depth of Peter's character, so he's just a dick who just is obnoxious. And you also remove the tension of the scene. So, well, a lot of writers now, because they write with a kind of a cinematic writing. They just write because they're so informed by movies and television that they just don't even think about that. But like for a character like Spider-Man, you need that because it's critical to his character, because the duality of Spider-Man is why he is so loved. It is the fact that he's both. He is both confident and scared at the same time, or confident and concerned.
Right. Well, and that's part of the important growth of the character of Spider-Man, because like Spider-Man is like, especially early days, right? The Spider-Man, the ethos is the man that Peter the boy wants to be, right? So sometimes he's not a perfect man because Peter's not a perfect boy. So he's got to project, and sometimes his imagination is not right too, because he's trying to project what he thinks he wants to be, and maybe that's not who he wants to be. So that's all a big part of the thing. But I want to break off from that point of Spider-Man for just a second. Okay. Talk about this cinematic idea in comics, right? And I want to go back to let's see, and I were talking this a few weeks back, or maybe a month back, talking about the Dark Knight Returns, and how Frank Miller had the perfect marriage of the cinematic with the internal monologue in the Dark Knight Returns, where it looks like a movie, but it feels like a narrative comic.
He's great.
Well, the other thing influenced like every Batman movie in the last 40 years.
Yeah. And the thing he did, when you have those thought balloons do something more than just give you the readers and the characters' internal monologue. They control the pacing. You've got something there that the writer wants to keep you on that panel for a certain amount of time to make the story feel like it's taking place in a certain amount of in a certain flow. Whereas without it, you're just like, he's swinging over the buildings, he lands, he fights.
Yeah. The Dark Knight Returns had I don't know, it probably was not the first time or anything, but you're talking about how it combines cinematic and the thought balloon thing, but his thoughts are all, he's the narrator. Bruce Wayne is the narrator. It's like him driving in the sports car going, this would be a good death, and those little blocks. And that's kind of what has replaced thought balloons, is those
captions.
Blocks nowadays with the little icons and background colors telling you who's thinking what, but and maybe that is a better way than the puffy cloud with the little smoke.
Sorry.
I think a good thing to point out too is like Miller's art style is so stylized that even a lot of the old timers at that time like felt like he was ruining comics.
I mean,
and now it's like seen as the pinnacle, of Batman storytelling.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, you want to see me ruin comics? Let me put up Dark Knight 2.
Hey, I love the ending of that.
We don't talk about that book.
The get out of my cave scene is still good. I like that one.
I haven't read it yet, so I can't comment on it. But I love the tension that immediately pops up in the room.
It's fair to criticize. It has a couple good moments, but I'm not gonna. I will concede that it's not nearly as good as the first installment. But to speak to Michael's point, when I mentioned the thought balloons, I think captions and thought balloons are kind of using the same function there, and that's all well and good. But there's a sort of cinematic comic book storytelling that won't even use either of those.
Right.
It'll just have characters just talking and just only at the surface level of what we would see as if we were watching this on the screen, and we don't get to see their interior thoughts. And like I said, when you strip away the interior thoughts of like a character like Spider-Man, you lose so much of his character. And like I said, I think it cripples the storytelling.
Well, and one thing that literary, and this is one of the things like comics are literature, right? And one of the things that literature is different than theater, right, is that literature demonstrates the inner man and the outer man. Theater and cinema is theater. Theater can only show the outer man, and even on asides and when you're talking to the audience in Shakespearean theater, it reflects the inner man, but it's still projected on the outer man. Whereas literature can have a different type of storytelling with that. And I think that we need to embrace that comics are literature, not theater, because there is a difference in the way we perceive those things.
Yeah, you can. I think some characters need the thought balloon kind of thing more than others. I mean, I can see where, if you have a Superman comic with a good artist and you can get expressive facial features, you can tell what a character is thinking. That's just like you can in a movie, when they cut to somebody and they're like giving somebody the side eye, like, oh, he's thinking, I know what's on his head. But if you're reading Spider-Man, you're reading Iron Man, those things don't move. It's
well, and let's bring up an example like George Perez, great artist that will drastically change, facial features, and he still has a wall of text all over his comics, and it takes forever to read. So, he still understood the medium and how people usually want to perceive it. It's weird because I think it's people now want to breeze through the comics, and back in the day, people were pissed if it didn't take you 25 minutes to read a comic. They felt like they were cheated out of their $1.25.
Well, and I think that's one of the things too, where you look at you're paying $5-6 for a 20-page comic.
It
takes you 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, I want to go back to the manga thing. This is $10, right?
And that's going to take you an hour.
Right. Yeah, it does. I mean, at least. Now, the thing is the pages, each page reads about like a Western comic as far as the speed of a modern Western comic. You're turning pages really quick, but you get this many pages.
But also keep in mind that even before it gets to that trade paperback, it is being given to an audience every single week, and then they vote. Is this good? Should we keep making this? Oh, it's not good. Okay, then the editor goes, hey, last issue the audience didn't like your book. You better get better. And so then they go, okay, we got to tweak the story, make it better. Oh, we didn't do a good job. And then it gets voted out. So the audience is reinforcing. So you have to make a good. So the story has to be good. Mm-hmm. And if your thing is bad, you don't get published. The guy who created Naruto, which is a massive hit amongst young people, he puts out a new manga, and they cancel it after a year. They're like, it wasn't good. People didn't like this. And in comics, we would go, well, he's the creator of Naruto. We have to let him do whatever he wants. Yeah. Whereas in manga, it's I don't care that you're the creator of Naruto. It didn't do well. You're out. So we so we reward bad behavior.
Listen, Jimmy the Balloon is no Naruto. Okay, come back when you've got a better idea.
But we reward bad behavior. When Scott Snyder was putting out stuff at the very beginning, I was all into it, and then when he just got massive stardom, his comics got so lazy, and then he just everything had to be good. This massive, there's the speed blue force, I don't know, and so if an audience people were like, hey, that sucks, and they go, well, that's Scott Snyder. And in Japan, it'd be
at least he listens to people and tries to do what people want.
But look at Brian Michael Bendis. Why isn't anyone going?
He'll literally shit on you.
Yeah, like Cummings was like, "Hey, Brian, stop doing," and then they're like, "Hey, sit down real quick," and he got shit on. It happened. That's why he's bald. He had to shave it all off because of all the shit that Brian pooped on him.
One thing to address, since we're all talking about poop now, one thing to address in the chat, people were cheated out of $1.25. Yes, because when comics were $1.25, a tank of gasoline cost $1. Yeah, not a tank, a gallon.
You gotta realize that $1.25 was $5 now.
Yeah. That was it's been 400% inflation since the late 90s.
You poor guys. 35-cent comics. 35-cent comics.
I own many that say 35 cents, but I never paid 35 cents for any of them.
I mean, to ping off of that point, I think that if you could make comics like $1 and have the current change nothing, but make them $1, I feel like we'd be looking at a different market.
Mhm.
Well, especially if you implement that blockchain idea and you can get them to people, like, and have some sort of website where people can just, get them. And you have that now. But the thing is you're paying the same price as if you went to go get a paper copy. And the paper copy is driven by speculation and collectability. It's a totally different, like, atmosphere,
Yeah.
and you can have
That's why
that,
digital won't catch
keep
on.
that, and that's a great thing. But the thing is you want to create more fans, and you get more people by, lowering the price point and getting people in, getting them hooked, like a drug.
I will say, I think that a dollar is probably a little low because $1 is of so little value today. Like, everybody at the table, even Tyler is old enough, right? That like that seems almost reasonable. Except you got to realize that, like, today, like, $1 is nothing. Yeah, right. $1 is $2.50 is something.
You can't even buy a candy bar for $1.
You can't buy a candy bar for $1, right? So $1 is nothing. But, like, $2, that's something. So if we get them for $2, right, then I think that's a ticket, right?
But it's okay. So let's say you get the price down. You get the price down. It's it's $1.99. It's $2.50. It's whatever you freaking want it. It doesn't change the fact that people people need to know where to get it. It's there because they're not going to the comic book store. So that's why I think it's great that these bigger publishing companies are going to distribute to Random House and whatnot. RJ, our age difference is about to hit. Let's go. You have a comment?
No, I was just thinking, they don't know where to get them, and Perch put up some video today of a duck and the got any grapes, and it just you have to see it. It's definitely encapsulates the current comic book market today.
What bee got under your bonnet, Tyler? You're just spoiling for a fight tonight.
I am ready. I got into a fight. I've been into fights every single day. Like on Monday, Monday it was Twitter people. Tuesday it was at work. Wednesday it was Twitter people, and today it was at work.
You just need to delete Twitter.
That's about half your fights. That's also more than half your marketing.
I know.
Okay.
And I like to see, and I like to get DMs from Matt saying, "Here's a link."
Yeah. Here's the thing too. Like, I got on the Twitter note, because I understand what you're saying entirely, Captain. But, like, I quit my personal Twitter for a month, and, like, my view counts on the show, like, dropped. Right. Like, I've had 2 years steady people, like a relatively steady growth, very small growth, but steady growth. I've been on almost every Thursday. People know about the show. But people forget it's Thursday. And my reach on my Ideal Comics is so much smaller than on my personal Twitter that people weren't showing up. And that was weird. That was weird to me. I was like, man, I guess I'll have to, maybe I ought to deal with, oh, crap.
No, it's true, though. I stopped live streaming for 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. I had to deal with some stuff. I normally stream to around 20 to 40 people. And I'm like, I streamed like last week and it was like 5. I was like, where'd you guys all go? And some people in the chat were like, oh, we thought you stopped doing this. I was like, I was gone for a week, guys.
I'm sitting here like, you get 5? You get 5?
Well, so, well, yeah, and I think the price point is. I think you're 100% right, though. That the distribution, and this is especially true for indie guys, right? Like, distribution is impossible. I don't even know how to throw a net wide enough to get a new a new product noticed. And I mean, I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm figuring it out.
Yeah. This stream has now become "What is Reese doing wrong?" stream part 2.
Oh man, I tell you what.
Everybody line up. Time for the roast.
Yeah. No, I did that back in January. I had some people on to make fun of me. It was great.
Oh, jeez.
So,
No, it's true though. It's just like even as an indie creator, what do you like? Where do you go? Like you have to build out a platform somehow, and then get people who are like minded, and then market to them, and that's it's hard. It's so hard.
And that's why I'm scared about having an ambassador for comics among,
You have to be your own ambassador, is what I.
Yeah, you have to be your own ambassador because God forbid we get Kim Kardashian to be an ambassador for comics.
I want her to be I want Kim Kardashian to be an ambassador for comics. Can you imagine the revenue? Can you imagine the people?
Except here's the
Kim
thing:
Kardashian
you have to write to that audience.
Kim Kardashian would be great, but
Yes, you got to pay that.
Oh my god!
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
It's going to be Kim Kardashian and Kanye West.
Oh my gosh!
And the writing is going to start catering towards her following, which means it's just going to leave you further behind because they're going to write to their interests and their thinking, and you'll be like, "What the hell? Why is Batman wearing green?"
Okay, then how about this? Because it's funny because I'm like, yes, but I also hate the outcome. But what do we mean by saving comics then? Because if that happens, and now you have millions of people reading comics, and Batman is way off course than what you were. Well, what does saving comics mean? Is it bringing it back to the way it was, or getting it back to a healthy industry of millions of people reading it? Because if it's millions of people reading it, yeah, sign up Kim Kardashian, have Kim Kardashian promote comics. If it's we want them the way that they used to be, in my mind, it's like it's over.
Yep, yeah. You're late to the show. We defined it early on.
I don't necessarily.
Well, and I don't care particularly if Batman keeps publishing because comics. If we want to save comics, we want people to read them. So if DC Comics isn't going to publish good Batman comics, they'll get in line when you show them, how much money you can make doing your thing or whatever. Mm-hmm. If you do succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I don't know what that is, obviously.
I think that's one thing that Doug Taple was talking about a couple of years ago, late in 2019, I think it was. He was saying, if Disney owns Star Wars, they need to do whatever they want to do with it because it's theirs. I'm not going to sit here and complain about I don't like Star Wars. I might mention it, but it's their thing. They can do what they want with it. I'm going to do what I want and try to find my market. And I think that there will always be a market for the classic superhero comics, but they may not be Batman. And if Batman dies, so what? And
there's for example, there's plenty of characters that have basically fallen off over the years. When was the last time there was really a Tarzan market, or
it's a niche market.
Tons of different characters just falling off. You never see them again, and Batman is here, but he could disappear.
He might, but okay. Another thing though that
more. This, I was going to say I agree with Captain Cummings, and I think we should put pair comics with drug dealing. I think that's the best way to get people addicted to them.
You got to put the drugs in the comics, and then
there we go.
You get them hooked.
Sniff the ink.
I think another thing that's terrible, that's just terrible about the comic book industry is just how unwilling they are to accept new talent because they feel the need to hold on to Scott Snyder's Brian Michael Bendis, he did something 10 years he was really cool 10-20 years ago. Well, now he's not. He's writing really bad comics. Get some get some new people who will prove themselves, and if you don't prove yourselves, you out. And then the next person will, prove yourself instead of keeping all these, old timers who aren't producing the level of comics that they need. I mean, I found out that James Tynion is still on Justice League Dark. I follow him on Twitter and Instagram. I have yet to see any freaking promotion on that because he doesn't care anymore. He's like, I'm in.
Yeah. Once you're in, you're part of the group.
Yeah.
It's I read, and the thing is, you got to realize is that's how the comic industry started was because people were being gatekeeped out of the other industries. You know, newspaper, comics were filled up, painting, illustration, all this other stuff was filled up, and they were being gatekeeped out of it. So they created their own. And it's like essentially that's kind of what it seems needs to happen now.
Well, and
everybody else is being gatekeeped out because there's only so much of a market, and they're all, you know, doing the nepotism things and keeping their friends in. Mm-hmm. So now someone else needs to go adjacent and do their own thing. Well,
and I mean, in a lot of ways, and I don't want to get too much into that on this show because I will do a thing on video on it. But I've been doing some digging. There's always been gatekeepers in comics. So what do you think? What do you think the Comics Code Authority was? You know,
the Comics Code Authority was the two biggest comic book companies, Dell and DC Comics, writing a code so they could get rid of 30 different companies.
And some of them were already on their way out anyway. But that's
according to Richard Silvercleat, who told me this in an interview I had with him 20 years ago. The Comics Code Authority saved the comics industry from complete and utter collapse. Yeah, so while it did get rid of EC and stuff, we still have them.
Yeah, well, I think that's one aspect of it. But there are.
I would disagree with that, but
I think that anyway, that's a whole show. That is a whole show. And I don't want to get into that at the 1 hour and 40 minute mark.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take in mind the mindset of who were the antis at that time. I mean, you talk about SJWs and such canceling things now over things. You had basically the government with that SJW mindset, and they were going for the ultimate cancellation.
Congress knew that they couldn't actually censor anything, so they told the companies, you need to regulate yourself. And so that's why I said Dell and DC then strong-armed everybody, and they used the mafia. We won't get into all that, but if you didn't know this, DC Harry Donafield was very connected with the mafia, and that's publishing in general, but especially in New York City. But I don't have the book with me right here. I was reading it earlier today. It's in my car.
The largest comic distributor was
America's Comics News.
American News Distributor was actually was being investigated from like 1947 on as under antitrust regulation.
You think there'd have been a lot? You think there'd have been a lot fewer crime comics because the guys would be like, hey, this is an awful lot like that last, that looks too much like.
Well, and the biggest one that did it, what's his name? I got his. The Garrett books. Crime Does Not Pay.
Oh yeah.
He actually paid his artists very well, like highest in the industry apparently, and they got all their, even just like the pulps, they got them all their stories from the newspaper. They're like, oh, here's a great story about a crime. Put that into a book.
Yeah, and it's a whole thing. But yeah, the American news distribution got shuttered basically in 57, and the only person to take their place that had enough connections was DC. They just happened to be running the whole show at that point, shockingly enough. So, anyways. So, but yeah, and I think distribution is definitely a factor, and I think that getting comics where they can get, and I think we live in a digital world, so the idea of having
and the big thing is there's a big shakeup right now in comics with distribution, and who knows what's going to happen.
Yes,
right,
yeah.
So here's the question: This was hotly debated among some circles. Where does everybody here stand on the whole diamond before? I mean, they're practically not an issue today, but
with diamond here, there's stability, but with it gone, like literally, who knows what's going to happen? And I think the smaller companies, it's going to be rough for them. The bigger ones are, Marvel and DC. Well, ran by big corporations. They're fine, but it's the smaller ones like not so much Image, I don't think, but Dark Horse, IDW.
Oh
Well,
no,
IDW
not
would go to Penguin.
IDW! Please, no, save them.
They'll just go to Penguin because what do they print? Marvel reprint stuff and new Marvel stuff.
Well, sure, but I
Marvel's on there.
don't want to see any company, go under that's making comics, because they could make something. They could, do something different. I don't know.
Yeah, well, they did that, that Lock and Key Sandman crossover. I thought that was great, but then I read something else they do, and I'm like, nope, that's why everybody throws off IDW.
Well, Well, the thing about IDW is they do those huge artist books, though.
Yeah, they do.
Or like Fantagraphics, like they do weird stuff, and then they do, just a plethora of all kinds of different stuff.
Well, everybody's splitting off into new distributorships now and leaving Diamond. And Diamond basically shot themselves in the foot when they wouldn't distribute,
Well, they were garbage.
Yeah. They shut down for, during COVID. DC's like, well, these people are distributing and our contract's up and we'll just go to them. And then Diamond was suddenly, did we say August? No, we can ship in May. Sure, we can ship in May.
Well, and that's the big thing is, like, they showed how bad they were, and they didn't have any money. They didn't, their funds wasn't liquid, so they couldn't even pay their employees, so they couldn't run a business. And it's like, it just showed how bad, like, everything was with it. And COVID, like, exposed the whole thing that we already knew it was pretty bad. Like, how many comic book stores complain about damaged product and just all sorts of not getting issues, all kinds of like BS that
paying
if you're a good distributor,
$4 book in one box.
Having being charged for freight and everything.
Yeah.
Well, and then that's the crazy thing too, talking about the freight costs, and like Perch has done a lot of videos. And by the way, not no, I don't have a marketing agreement with Perch, but if you're not following his channel, there's something wrong with you. But he's done analysis of comic sales. And one of the things that factors into a lot is that, Marvel does have a history of overships where they're not charged for the books, but they are charged for the shipping.
Right.
And so you get a small shop in Podunk,
Nebraska.
Iowa or something. Or Nebraska, right?
Yeah, and
Keep it real.
Yeah.
Those overships count as sales numbers in the Diamond.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, they have to pay for shipping and may not be able to move the books,
Yeah.
Because let's face it, Devil Dinosaur doesn't sell in comic shops. It just doesn't.
Well, the first
So
issue
awful.
does because it's a first appearance.
Yeah.
And so people are speculating on it now.
Yeah.
So now
Why would people still speculate on comic books is beyond me. That's like,
Well, because they're worth money. Like, people are spending retarded money on them.
they were worth money. The new ones now. You think Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur #1, the reboot from Marvel now, is going to be worth anything in
the future? No, but right now, let me look it up real quick.
Because I know that bubble burst with was it the Jim Lee X-Men cover? Because that thing is it's. I think it's worth. Is it $20 or something? It's not worth anything in real money.
Death Mate Black. Yeah.
Yeah.
First appearance of Gen 13. You can find it in any quarter bin.
I'm just seeing what's the actual name of the Devil Dinosaur, the new Devil
Moon Girl. It's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur.
Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur.
Yeah, it used to be Moon Boy, and he was this furry like monkey kid.
Okay, so for example, here it is right here. Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur #1. This one is a current auction that has 14 hours, and the comic is going for the upwards of $66 with 28 bids.
Right, but I think that's
issue. That's not even a trade or an omnibus. That's just one single first appearance issue.
That's so inflated, though. I don't.
I'm telling you, like, the secondary speculation comic book market is so crazy right now. Like, anything that's
But it's weird though, because I would say that the only people who buy them are other speculators who want to make more money. It's not like there's no fan.
Well, that's the key. That's where how long does the inflating of these prices happen till it collapses?
it's an Ouroboros eating its own tail. There's not a bunch of consumers who go, I really want that book.
The thing is, I think that for some of them there are, because one of the things you have, like with that title, specifically that title, the trade sales through Scholastic have been consistently
They're really good
for 12 years, right? Or whatever it is. I think it's 12. But people are still buying that book. And so there are little girls who are now, in their mid-20s who started reading comics by buying that at their school, and they may care.
That actually ties into the thing I wanted to talk about regarding, and I'm with Cummings again with talking about kind of historical context with the thing I wanted to suggest or explore for fixing the industry or addressing it. So I've been doing some reading into the picture book market and kind of some of the interactions between that and comics. So there's this really interesting book called the Minders of Make-Believe, I think it's called. And this guy kind of covers the history of the children's picture book market. I think it's by a guy named Marcus, I think. And so the book basically details how back in the day, the children's picture book market was basically invented because children's picture books, at least the kind that, what we think of like The Hungry Caterpillar or Mike Mulligan and the Steam Shovel, that type of children's picture book. It was very much it was a taste-making kind of invention. It wasn't necessarily a popular media. In fact, the librarians at the time, there was one in particular who was the librarian of the New York Library. She and others were just furious at how comic books sold something like, was it 2 million copies like a month? And they were so pissed because people were not reading their literary children's picture books, and they were handing each other Newbery medals, and they were saying these books were super important, and the kids would go, nah, and go read comics. So that was then. Now,
are there any guns?
The story is completely inverted now. Now children's picture books, I think, sell way more than comics do. So something happened, and one of the things that I think was interesting was to watch the power, the institutional power that these gatekeeping librarians had. And so the reason why Raina Telgemeier, Dogman, and Jeff Smith's Bone, for example, kicked off so well. Because Bone was a great comic, but one of the reasons why it became a national phenomenon was because librarians saw it, librarians liked it, and then they started marketing it as a children's, actually as an early reader. Scholastic actually markets it as kind of like an early reader book. And so it's really fascinating to study how librarians have all this power because they operate as gatekeeper tastemakers for what kids should read and what they're provided to in school and in those environments. So I think that the indie scene, the countercultural scene, whatever you want to call it, Comicsgate and other connected things, I think if they want to establish a greater foothold, it's time to start making really good relationships with librarians and those types of tastemakers to get your book approved for those types of markets. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to make kiddie content. Bone has some pretty adult themes in it. And I was just at my local library recently, and they had a wall of, I think it's relationships with monster girls or dates with monster girls. And that is just it's basically furry porn almost. And this was at, like I said, a public library. So I don't think that those relationships with librarians have to be, everything has to be like super sanitized, but I think it's really important to start, exploring those institutional power dynamics because they wield such power and influence. And if the librarians pick up your book, that's how Bone became a national sensation.
So the librarians are also a major factor in the 1950s like anti-comic movement too.
Exactly. You're right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And not to interrupt, but that actually didn't start. And this is one of the things. Librarians were writing articles before Wortham was involved. He was brought into something that was already going on and had been going on since 1943.
Yeah, let me look up. Like, there was like this one librarian in New York, and she was like the matron of picture books for like decades.
Yeah, and I mean, I got to be honest. Like, I was raised by librarians. I have a lot of respect for libraries, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like there's not the shadiness going on.
You got these adults always think that they know what's best for children, and it's like just let children like what they like.
Yeah,
a lot of the times, you know.
If comics were selling in the millions when librarians and parents hated them, why are we trying to appease the librarians and the parents, thinking that's going to increase sales? Maybe we should get back to printing comics that scares parents again.
Yeah, and I think that was the factor. I mean, that's actually one of the things that Cap and I were talking about. And I'm going to forget her name. The gal who worked for DC.
Oh, the Loretta Bender. Loretta Bender was a medical doctor that did electroshock therapy on very like mentally ill children, and she actually worked in the same hospital for a period with Wortham. They were both doctors there, and she was brought on as a sort of like, she would take the books and read them with the children and stuff like that, and sort of like a spokesman, saying, yeah, these are good comics or whatever. And she would get paid, I don't know, some amount of money.
And one of the things that in the trials that she specifically said was that, if they see something that's too scary, they'll quit reading it. Most children are aware of their own sensibilities enough where they're not going to damage themselves while they read. And the ones that are already hurt, they're already hurt. I mean,
she said the big thing was a lot of the times these comics that you're saying are scary, people always think that children are stupid, but no, they're usually a lot smarter than you give them credit for. And so they'll read this comic that you're saying is too scary, and they'll be like, no, this is like silly, this is stupid, it's a story, ghosts aren't real, or whatever the case may be.
Well, it reminds me of a story. My dad, we were watching TV, flipping the channels when I was a kid, and the Time Machine movie came on, and so you've got the thing where the Eloi are called to their deaths by the Morlocks, and my dad's just he's getting into it, and he's leaning forward, and he's getting all nervous, and he gets up and he goes over and he shuts off the television and said, "This is too intense for you children." And I'm like, "What are you?" I think it's too intense for you, Dad. I'm perfectly okay with what's going on here.
I remember I was so scared of it, the 80s one as a kid.
Tim Curry?
Yeah, and then I watched it with my son like last year, and I was like, why the heck was I scared of this movie? Like, it's crazy.
I watched the new It with my son when he was 11, and I was like, this could be a bad idea. And there's the scene where right there when Georgie's arm gets ripped off. I'm like, okay, and my son's just laughing. I'm like, he's either really well adjusted or I need to sleep with the door locked.
You never really know. That's the trick about being a parent. You can't really prepare. You just got to deal with it.
Just don't hand him the book.
Speaking, now we've come full circle to Stephen King. Look at that.
That movie would have had an entirely different rating if they'd have killed the monster the way they did in the book.
I can't imagine watching it at 11. Because I was watching Star Trek II when I was 12, and the scene with the eels going in the ears had me sleeping for a month like this. I was 12. I knew it was all special effects. It still was scary, and that was a movie. Nobody ever showed me.
That's what's so great about movies back in the day, though, was it was more of the idea of the thing that was happening that was scary than like now they show you, full gore porn. and it's like there's no like imagination to it.
Yeah, it's the more you see, the less scary it really is.
I think it depends. I think it depends on which your disposition as a child. Because I watched Fright Night way too early. I think it was around 12, and I had daymares for like a month. No, I'm serious. Like if I was left alone for any span of time, I had panic attacks. It was. But like, I watch it now. I watch it now and I love it. But like I watched it at the wrong time. Kind of like Michael watched. It's
poor tender thing, Twitless.
Yeah, that scarred me.
So, well, I don't think we came up with anything. No, that's not true. There's been several ideas about things that would work. I think would be really good as far as helping in the industry out. But they're not going to listen to us anyway. So, but it's been a really fun conversation, guys. So thanks for coming on, each and every one of you. But it's about 9, and I think we'll call it a show, unless anybody else has anything left to say.
No.
I gotta go.
Yeah. Well, Mike, thanks for coming on. I know you were having some technical problems, but I appreciate you persisting and coming back in.
The computer that has the bad Wi-Fi is right here. I don't know why this is great and this is bad.
I'm going to have some fun this weekend, by the way, since we're old guys talking about old things. I'm binging.
Yeah! I couldn't get that. I wanted it and it was out.
Speaks for yourself on old
I've already
guys.
binged this.
In outer space.
Oh, Thundar. You want to talk about traumatizing? Thundar came out. It was like there was, you're watching ABC that morning, and there's like Plaz and Plastic Man and Baby Plaz, and there's the Happy Days gang traveling in time. There's Bugs Bunny, and there's Super Friends, and then all of a sudden you're watching a comet rip the atmosphere away from the Earth, killing billions of people.
Which apparently causes people to get magic powers.
What's that?
Which apparently causes people to get magic powers.
Well, yeah, it transforms the people who are left, and there's acid rain that kills you, and there's monsters and
Tyler, isn't this the plot of Adventure Time?
Yeah, like I don't know what I need. Old guys, I'm binging this 70s.
Ariel,
all the actors are dead.
Yeah, but that actually makes me think.
All I'm going to say is when I used to watch Saturday night morning cartoons, like Rocky and Bullwinkle and the Looney Tunes were like my 2 favorite ones, even though those were like 30 years before my time.
Well, and some longer, like some of the Looney Tunes that were replaying when we were kids were stuff from the 30s still, that were still getting the airplay.
Okay, like I love the one where it was like a theater opera with Bugs Bunny and
yeah. That's a
I
classic.
don't remember what that one's called. I haven't seen it in like
What's up or not?
years.
So
But
I watched the one where was it Yosemite Sam Goes to Hell, and that also traumatized me as a child.
I don't.
Oh,
I
man, you need to go
don't think I've
therapy
seen that
with
one.
this.
I just had the worst luck. This is Looney Tunes. This is safe. And no, here's the devil.
Yeah, that's amazing. But yeah, Tyler, we are old.
It's
But
okay.
one day you will be too.
We grew up in the time when like there was a Freddy Krueger or a Jason movie like every like year.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We have like
Satan's waiting.
The
Satan's
Conjuring
waiting
and
for
like
that
Saw.
Yeah, Saw was like after I graduated high school, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, my day and age, we get to watch like 18-year-old YouTubers like box and hit each other.
Yeah,
But
that's
that's cool.
yeah. I watched that too, but no, it's a little less formative. It's more something to put on the background while I'm working on other things.
Yeah.
We used to have this guy named Mike Tyson, and he used to bite people in the ear.
At least he had skill, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. That was. But see, this is the crazy thing about that fight, man. I remember that because like Mike Tyson was unstoppable at his peak, right? But he was just past it, and Evander Holyfield was just such a brute, right? He was just so. I mean, he wasn't as fast as Tyson. He wasn't as precise as Tyson.
He kept tiring him out by grabbing him, and Mike Tyson just got frustrated.
Oh man! And but Holyfield could just take so much abuse, and Tyson was, and it was just it. It just was. Oh man. Anyway, that was a whole different thing. That was That was high
You
school.
hear that, chat? We got some like
I wanted to
veterans talking
promote
old
this
war
book.
stories.
I saw this book the other day on Amazon, and it's only $2. Like they have multiple copies, so run out there and grab it right now. They have 2 different printings. I liked this cover the best, obviously, because it has Marvel and DC heroes on the same cover. But I haven't read it yet. But like, it's a history book. Well, it's like it says it is. It's the first history modern comics, and it was written in '87. So, like, that tells you
Modern.
I don't know. $2 though. I mean, you can't beat that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good price. That's a pretty good price. But, okay, we're gonna call it. So I have a comic. Tyler has a comic. Tootless has a comic. You can go find us somewhere. Mike has a comic that you can't find, but it's really good. But
I got no way to distribute it.
I got go buy this book off Amazon.
So that's it.
I didn't do it though, but
that's all the shilling we're going to do tonight, guys. Have
I
a good
have
one.
a network. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. It's a fun show, but we're going to call it. So next week, I will do one shilling. Next week, we are having Scott Wilson from the Flock on. We are having Matt Krotz and Larry Bernard on, and myself to talk about Kyrie. So, which I also co-wrote a story for that one. So
Yeah, you should have came on with them last.
Yeah,
couple
I
days
didn't.
ago.
I didn't get the invite, and that's okay. And then Matt was like, "Why did I send you the invite?" And I couldn't have made it anyway, so it didn't matter. I was doing stuff while you guys were watching it, so.
Okay.
But that's okay. So that's the story. That's the show. That's it. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.